The HOA president was already ripping Christmas lights off my roof when I got home from work. I'm talking both hands full, yanking my brand new programmable LEDs like she was harvesting crops. Her little squad of clipboard-carrying loyalists stood below holding trash bags filled with the decorations I'd spent 12 hours putting up. Snow was falling gently. Bing Crosby was playing from my neighbor's yard. It should have been peaceful. Instead, they had ladders leaning against my gutters like a SWAT raid on Santa's workshop. And the best part? When I stepped out of my truck and shouted, "You're trespassing!" HOA President Marla Whitfield didn't even climb down. She just looked over her shoulder, smirked, and said, "Christmas displays are banned this year. New bylaw. We passed it this morning." She was wrong. Very wrong. Because I'm not just some guy on the block. I'm Evan Blake, the former municipal attorney who wrote the Oak Hollow HOA bylaws 12 years ago. I literally wrote the rulebook she was trying to weaponize. And by climbing onto my roof, by cutting my wiring, by destroying my property, Marla had just broken 7 sections of the bylaws I created. She didn't know it yet, but her little Christmas ban? It was going to be the last rule she ever tried to pass. This is the story of how I used her own paperwork, her own signatures, and her own arrogance to collapse her entire HOA and save Christmas on my street. And it all started with the dumbest decision she ever made, messing with the guy who drafted the laws she was abusing. My street isn't normal during December. It's legendary. Maplewood Lane turns into what the locals call the Tunnel of Lights. Every house has a theme. Every window glows. Kids walk the block drinking hot chocolate. Cars drive from other towns just to see the displays. It wasn't about winning or showing off. It was tradition, family, community. So imagine my surprise when, 2 weeks before Christmas, I got home to find my lights being torn down like contraband. My first thought wasn't anger. It was disbelief. "Marla," I shouted, slamming my truck door. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She didn't even blink. Didn't even stop tearing down the lights I'd hung that morning. This woman had the posture of someone who'd never been told no in her life. Standing on my roof in winter boots like she owned the air she was breathing. The other board members, Tom with his dad jeans, Barbara with her resting vinegar face, and Nelson who always looked lost, stood in my yard like a firing squad. Marla ripped down a whole string and tossed it at them. "Bag it," she commanded, pointing. "This trash is getting hauled to the dump." "No one is throwing out my lights," I growled, stepping forward. "Get off my damn roof." She planted her feet. "Not until I'm finished enforcing the rules." "What rules?" I snapped. She grinned like a wolf who found a slow rabbit. "The ones we passed at this morning's emergency HOA meeting." That word, emergency, was her whole strategy. I knew the trick. She called surprise meetings with almost no notice so normal working people couldn't attend. But she made one fatal mistake. One gigantic mistake. She handed me the trash bag that held the cut wires from my lights. The moment I saw the severed cords, something inside me snapped. Cutting live holiday wiring in freezing temperatures? That wasn't rule enforcement. That was criminal damage. I took a long breath, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "Marla, you have no idea what you've just done." She rolled her eyes. "Spare me the lecture. Christmas displays are banned this year. The board voted. End of story." I smiled. Not a happy smile. A lawyer's smile. "You can't ban Christmas lights," I said softly, "because the bylaws explicitly forbid the HOA from regulating temporary seasonal decor. Section 12B, subsection 4. You remember that one?" Her face twitched. She remembered it, because I wrote it, and I wrote it for people exactly like her. "Those bylaws are outdated," she snapped. "We're modernizing the community." I lifted an eyebrow. Did the vote pass with quorum? Of course. Was there prior notice? Absolutely. Did you file the meeting minutes with the county? Her confidence wavered. The other board members exchanged nervous looks, because they knew what I was asking. I wasn't asking random questions. I was asking the legal questions that determine whether a bylaw change is valid. or whether the HOA is about to get sued into dust. You're stalling, she said, climbing down the ladder. We already voted. Enforcement is active. Your display is gone. She shoved the bag of my destroyed lights into my chest. That was the moment I decided to end her. Not physically, legally, professionally, publicly. If she wanted a war over Christmas, she was going to get a war she could never win. Most neighbors think I'm just the quiet guy who keeps to himself, shovels other people's driveways, and plays guitar on the porch in the summer. They don't know the other side of me. They don't know I spent 18 years writing and enforcing municipal ordinances. They don't know HOAs used to hire me as a consultant. They don't know I can recite Oak Hollow's bylaws from memory because I personally drafted them in 2012. And they don't know that even after I retired from municipal law, I stayed on the county's list as a consultant for legal compliance. Meaning, my interpretation of the rules carries more weight than Marla's entire board. I didn't brag about it, didn't flaunt titles. But when someone abuses the power I helped build, when someone harms the community the bylaws were meant to protect, then I stop being Quiet Evan. I become Attorney Evan Blake, who can turn a corrupt HOA inside out before breakfast. And that's exactly what I plan to do. The moment Marla left, I grabbed my camera. I took photos, the cut wires, the torn decorations, the ladder staged on my property, the bags of destroyed lights, the footprints on my roof, video of the board trespassing. Then I walked to my neighbor's house across the street. Mrs. Henderson, 90 years old, sweetest human being alive. She opened the door holding a cup of tea. Evan, dear, she said, why was that awful woman stomping across your roof? I smiled. Did you happen to see everything? Oh yes, she said proudly. I recorded it. She said she'd fine me if I didn't stop filming, but I told her at my age fines are the least of my worries. God bless this woman. She handed me a USB drive. Make sure she gets what she deserves, she whispered. I intended to. That evening, I walked outside to see my entire block gathered in front of my house. 20 neighbors, kids, parents, even Mr. Lopez, who never came out in winter. All of them angry, all of them with stories. She ripped out my nativity scene, one said. She fined me for having white lights instead of warm lights, another added. She told my daughter her inflatable reindeer was tacky, shouted a third. They weren't just upset. They were fed up. I looked around at the street. Dark houses, decorations half torn down, all because of Marla's sudden Christmas ban. This wasn't about lights. It was about control, about power, about a woman so desperate to dominate the neighborhood she was willing to destroy the holiday spirit to do it. I held up my hands. Everyone, I said, I need statements, photos, videos, emails, every single interaction you've had with her. People started sending me files instantly. One neighbor forwarded illegal fines she'd been charged for ornament density. Another sent me audio recordings of Marla threatening to call code enforcement if he didn't tone down the festive clutter. One elderly man had been fined $75 because his wreath was too large for his door. It was a treasure trove of violations, and I knew exactly what to do with it. At midnight, I sat at my desk, typing faster than I had in years. Not angry, not emotional, focused. The kind of focus that only comes when you're about to end someone who has earned it. I drafted a formal complaint to the county, a violation report for unlawful enforcement, a civil suit notice, a cease and desist letter, a bylaw compliance audit request, a financial transparency demand, and a motion to remove the entire HOA board for misconduct. Each document referenced bylaws I wrote myself. Marla couldn't wiggle out, couldn't misinterpret, couldn't gaslight, because every argument she might try to use came from a rulebook with my initials at the bottom of the drafting sheet. I printed the stack, almost 2 inches thick, and slipped each item into a color-coded binder. When I was done, I stared at the cover. Oak Hollow HOA, Notice of Legal Action and Board Removal. This was more than paperwork. It was a battering ram, and tomorrow, I was going to swing it, The next morning, at precisely 9 a.m., I walked into the Oak Hollow HOA office. Not the boardroom, not the clubhouse. The tiny beige portable building behind the pool that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. Marla was inside, of course, sitting at her little desk like a queen on a cardboard throne. The look on her face when she saw the binder under my arm? Priceless. "Evan," she said, pasting on a fake smile. "If you're here to apologize for last night." "I'm not," I said, placing the binder gently on her desk. She frowned. "What is this?" "Your resignation packet." Her mouth dropped. The other board members sitting behind her froze. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "Marla," I said calmly, "I know what you've been doing. The fines, the intimidation, the selective enforcement, and now the illegal Christmas ban." I tapped the binder. "Inside is a full legal action against you and the entire board, along with every violation you've committed." She snatched the binder like she could rip the words out of it. "What authority do you think you have?" she hissed. "I wrote your authority," I answered. "You've been breaking the bylaws since the day you got elected." Marla laughed, a high, brittle sound. "You're delusional, Evan. I'm the HOA president. I can ban anything that threatens community standards." "And Christmas lights threaten community standards?" I asked. "They attract traffic. They disrupt uniformity. They encourage clutter. And joy," I added. "Don't forget joy." Her jaw tightened. "Get out of my office." "Gladly," I said. "Oh, and check your email. The county and the state attorney already have the same documents." Her face blanched. I opened the door to leave, but I didn't get a single foot out the door before someone blocked my path. Someone big. Someone wearing a reflective vest that said, "Community Safety Enforcement." It was laughable. They looked like mall cops who couldn't make the mall cop cut. Two of them, and one stepped forward with a clipboard. "Sir," he said firmly, "you're being cited." "For what?" I asked. "Creating a public disturbance yesterday, harassing board members, violating multiple holiday decor." I held up a hand. "Stop, before you embarrass yourself. We are authorized to enforce HOA rules," he insisted. "Then you should know," I said, "that you can't issue fines on the same day the alleged violation occurred. Section 9D. He blinked. "You can't enforce rules that don't exist." Section 12. Another blink. "And you can't wear badges that resemble law enforcement. That's a misdemeanor in this county." His eyes widened. Marla stood up fast. "Do not speak to my team that way," she shrieked. "They are official representatives of the HOA." "No," I said, walking past the man. "They're civilians playing dress-up, and if you send them to my house again, I'll have them arrested." I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I simply stated the law. And the law scares bullies more than fists ever could. By noon, she'd escalated. Hard. Neighbors texted me nonstop. "They're removing my lights. HOA patrols are going door to door. They tried to take my inflatable snowman. They said Santa's sleigh violates the silhouette policy. They unplugged my decorations." Every 15 minutes, another message, another violation, another neighbor terrified or furious. It wasn't enforcement. It was war. Marla had weaponized Christmas. I walked outside to check the street and froze. There were orange cones blocking the entrance to Maplewood Lane. A large, ugly plywood sign read, "Holiday Decor Restriction Zone. All displays prohibited. By order of HOA President." Cars were being turned away. A line of neighbors stood in the cold, arguing with community enforcers. Kids cried as their decorations were pulled down. It was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen here. A holiday turned hostile. "Evan," Mrs. Henderson yelled from her porch. "Do something." I nodded. I intended to. At 4 p.m., I received a text from the HOA mailing list. "Attention. Mandatory special board meeting. Tonight, 6 p.m. Clubhouse. Discussion. Legal action against non-compliant resident." Non-compliant resident? They meant me. Good. I wanted them all in one room. I showed up early, sat in the back. The board filed in first, acting confident. Then the residents arrived. I counted over 40 people. Everyone looked furious. When Marla walked in, people booed. She raised her hands dramatically. "Let's keep this civil," she barked. "Then stop tearing down Christmas decorations," someone shouted. She glared. "That's exactly why we're here tonight. To vote on disciplinary action against." She pointed at me. "Him." I smiled and waved. She slapped a stack of papers onto the table. "This resident," she said, "has been defiant, aggressive, hostile, and deliberately disruptive to community harmony." People muttered angrily. She continued, "He is facing multiple fines, including excessive lighting, unauthorized displays, defamation of the HOA, interference with enforcement, harassment, and obstruction of community safety officers." The room erupted in outrage. "That's ridiculous. He didn't harass anyone. You tore down his lights. This is out of control." Marla banged her gavel. "Silence or I will have you removed." I stood slowly. "Madam President," I said calmly, "per the bylaws, any accused homeowner has the right to speak before disciplinary action is taken." She glared daggers. "You may speak for 1 minute." "1 minute?" I asked. "The bylaws say 10. I am the president," she snapped. "I decide." I shrugged. "Fine. I don't need 10 minutes." I lifted my binder. "I only have to read Section 12B. Her eyes widened. Oh, she remembered Section 12B. "Holiday decorations," I read aloud, "shall not be constrained by aesthetic regulations and may be displayed from November 15th through January 10th. The room gasped. Marla's mouth twitched. I turned the page. And this line, my personal favorite: "No board member may enact emergency restrictions on seasonal decorations without 90 days advance notice and a community vote." The entire room erupted in murmurs. I slammed the binder shut. "The Christmas ban is illegal. The fines are illegal. The enforcement is illegal. Everything you've done this week is illegal." Marla's face turned purple. "You don't get to interpret our rules," she screamed. "I do." I stepped closer. "No," I said softly. "You don't." I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a sheet of paper, held it up. "I wrote your bylaws." Gasps filled the room. Her jaw literally dropped. I unfolded the paper, a copy of the original drafting page. My name was at the bottom, clear as day. The room went silent, so silent you could hear the icicles melting outside. "You're lying," she screamed, pointing at me. "You're fabricating documents. This is fraud." "Actually," said a new voice behind her. "It's not." Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was a county inspector, a real one, badge, clipboard, official jacket. I recognized him, Rick Morales. We'd worked together for 8 years. He nodded at me. "Got your email," he said. "Came to investigate the complaint." He looked around the room. "Who authorized the removal of legally protected holiday decorations?" No one spoke. He turned to Marla. "Ma'am." She swallowed hard. The board, we voted." "Without public notice?" he asked. Silence. "Without filing minutes?" More silence. "Without a quorum?" Even more silence. He scribbled on his clipboard. "This HOA is now under county investigation for unlawful enforcement and overreach. Until the investigation is complete, all HOA authority is suspended." The room erupted. Cheering. Applause. Neighbors hugging each other. Marla looked like she'd swallowed a snow globe. "You?" she whispered at me, shaking with anger. "You did this. You ruined everything." "No," I said. "You did." She lunged forward, but 2 very large sheriff's deputies stepped into the room. "Ma'am," one said, "we need you to step outside." "For what?" she screeched. The deputy lifted a printout. It was the complaint I submitted, and the video Mrs. Henderson recorded. The moment the deputy read the words, property destruction, trespassing, harassment, Marla went pale, frozen, silent, beaten. She looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she whispered. I smiled. "It is for you." And they escorted her out. When the deputies escorted Marla out of the clubhouse, she wasn't yelling anymore. She wasn't even fighting. She looked like someone who'd been unplugged from her own arrogance. Eyes blank, shoulders tight, breaths fast and shallow. A queen dethroned in front of her entire kingdom. And I should have been satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. But when the door slammed behind her, something inside me didn't feel triumphant. Felt unfinished. Because people like Marla don't go quietly. They don't fade away. Not without one last swing. And I knew, just by the way she glared at me over her shoulder, that she wasn't done. She was plotting. And desperate people are dangerous people. The board was stunned into silence. Nelson stared at the floor like a kid caught cheating on a spelling test. Barbara clutched her clipboard like a life raft. Even Tom, who usually looked annoyed at everything, looked almost frightened. The remaining board members were as lost as deer on an ice rink. The county inspector closed his folder. "I'll be conducting a full audit," he announced. "Expect interviews. Expect document requests. Expect consequences." He shot a glance at me. "And Evan, I'm going to need your notes." I handed him a thumb drive. He nodded. "This helps." Neighbors crowded around me as the inspector left, patting my back, shaking my hand, thanking me for standing up for everyone. Their voices blended together. Too many emotions at once. Gratitude, relief, exhaustion, but underneath it all, fear. Fear that somehow, someway, Marla wasn't finished. And they weren't wrong. Because as the meeting dissolved into nervous chatter and half-hearted holiday cheer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A single text. From a number I didn't recognize. "You should have stayed quiet. This isn't over." I stared at the message. My heart dropped, not from fear, but from confirmation. The war wasn't over. The war had just begun. By the time I walked home that night, Maplewood Lane felt different. Not scared. Angry. Not defeated. Determined. Neighbors had gathered again, huddled under porch lights and bundled in coats and scarves. Clusters of conversations buzzed across the street, words carried by the cold December wind. "Did you hear? They suspended the whole board. Did the county really step in? They can't take our Christmas. They can't." Kids were running around with cups of hot cocoa. Someone had brought out an old portable speaker playing Elvis Christmas classics. It should have felt festive. But the tension was still there. A storm beneath the lights. As I reached my driveway, Mrs. Henderson waved me over. "Evan dear, we saved something for you." I raised an eyebrow. She motioned toward her porch, where 4 neighbors stood guard over several boxes of Christmas lights. My Christmas lights, the ones Marla tried to steal. "Found them in the HOA dumpster," said Mr. Lopez proudly. "They didn't even bother to cover them." "Idiots," muttered my next-door neighbor, Jessica. "We grabbed everything before the garbage truck came." I opened one of the boxes. The wires were tangled, the bulbs scratched, the cords still muddy from where they'd been dragged off my house. But salvageable. I smiled. "Thank you," I said. "Seriously." "You don't thank us," Mr. Henderson said, crossing his arms. "We thank you." Another neighbor stepped forward. "So, what happens now?" Before I could answer, a different neighbor, Derek, father of 2 hyper kids, spoke up. "Now," he said, "now we rebuild." The crowd murmured. He turned to me. "You tell us what we can legally do, and we'll do it. We'll put every decoration back up. We'll make Maplewood Lane brighter than ever. Let's show her she can't scare us." The fire that lit in my chest wasn't anger this time. It was pride. These people had been bullied for years. But tonight they stood taller. "All right," I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear. "Here's what we do." Every head turned. Every child hushed. Only the distant jingle of a neighbor's wind chimes broke the silence. "We decorate," I said simply. "We put up every light, every inflatable, every wreath. Not because we want to fight, but because we want to celebrate. And the HOA? Someone asked nervously. I grinned. The HOA doesn't legally exist right now. They have zero enforcement powers until the county investigation finishes. They can't fine us. They can't remove anything. They can't even issue warnings. People gasped. Then what's stopping us? Shouted someone. Absolutely nothing, I said, and Maplewood Lane erupted into cheers so loud they echoed across the subdivision. It was chaos. It was unity. It was beautiful. Within minutes, neighbors rushed home to dig out their decorations. Storage bins spilled open. Lights tangled like holiday spaghetti. Extension cords coiled like hibernating snakes. The street came alive. Kids were climbing ladders, under supervision. Adults hammered stakes into frozen lawns. Someone fired up a generator to test synchronized lights. It was the Christmas rebellion, the Maplewood uprising, and I was in the middle of it. Around 7:30 p.m., I was halfway up my ladder, assessing the damage to the wiring on my roof, when a voice drifted out of the darkness. You're making a mistake, Evan. I looked down. Tom stood on the sidewalk, hands deep in his pockets, expression conflicted. He wasn't loyal to Marla. He wasn't brave either. He was a man who went whichever direction the wind blew hardest. Tonight, that wind was fear. Tom, I said, want to explain why you followed her orders? He swallowed hard. I didn't know she was serious, he said. She told us you were violating multiple safety codes, that your lights were dangerous, that the board had to act for liability reasons. She lied, I said bluntly. He winced like the word hurt. She said you were planning to sue us no matter what, he whispered. I paused, because that did sound like something she'd say. She told you I was a threat, I said. He nodded. Yeah. But the real threat, I continued, was her losing control. His shoulders sagged. What do we do, Evan? He asked quietly. She's still emailing us, threatening us, ordering us to enforce rules. She says the county doesn't have jurisdiction. I climbed down the ladder. Tom, I said firmly, listen to me. He looked up. The county absolutely has jurisdiction. More than the HOA. The board is suspended. If any of you enforce a single rule right now, you're personally liable. He paled. Personally, I repeated. Civil and criminal. He took a shaky breath. And in that moment, he looked like a man who realized he'd been standing on the wrong side of the firing line. Then he said something I didn't expect. She's planning something tonight. I froze. What kind of something? He looked around nervously. She called an emergency meeting. Not with the board. With the safety enforcers. She wants to stop the neighborhood from decorating. How? I demanded. She said, if she can't enforce fines, she'll enforce something else. What, Tom? What did she say specifically? He swallowed again. She said she'd cut the power. My blood ran cold. The power to what? The whole street. I sprinted down the street. Neighbors shouted after me. Confused. Evan, what's wrong? What happened? Where are you going? But I didn't stop. I ran to the far end of Maplewood Lane, to the utility box that fed the entire block. And just as I rounded the corner, I saw them. 3 of the HOA's safety officers. Same reflective vests. Same fake badges. Same false authority. And they weren't holding clipboards. They were holding bolt cutters. A generator-sized lock sat on the utility panel. A lock they were about to cut. I yelled before they could start. Hey! The biggest one turned. Oh, he groaned. You again. Step away from the panel, I commanded. Look, man, we're doing our job, he said. HOA orders. That panel belongs to the city, I shot back. Touch it, and you'll be facing felony charges. He shrugged. Lady said this is community equipment, so she can authorize us. She can't, I said, approaching. Not even a little. He rolled his shoulders. Look, I don't get paid enough to argue. That's because you're not supposed to be doing this at all, I snapped. The third man raised the bolt cutters again. We'll be quick. No, I said. You won't. I pulled out my phone. City Utilities Department, I said loudly, dialing. Yes. I'd like to report an attempted tampering with municipal infrastructure. Whoa, 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 the big guy shouted, dropping the cutters. We're leaving. We're leaving. The three of them scattered like raccoons caught in a porch light. Good. But I knew this wasn't the last attempt. And I also knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about Christmas for Marla anymore. This was personal. She wasn't just trying to stop lights. She was trying to stop me. By the time I made it back to the center of the neighborhood, the decorations were nearly complete. Lights wrapped every porch. Inflatables crowded every yard. Music drifted from houses that hadn't played Christmas tunes in years. Kids ran with glow sticks. Neighbors carried boxes. The entire street shone with defiant joy. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, to stand on the pavement with my hands in my pockets and watch the scene unfold. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. A reclaiming, a revival, a promise that this community deserved better than a dictator in a pantsuit. Jessica came up beside me, holding a strand of lights. You okay? She asked. I nodded. You don't look okay, she insisted. I hesitated, then told her. Marla tried to cut power to the whole street. Jessica froze. She what? Her goons were at the utility box. I stopped them. Her eyes widened. Evan, this is insane. I know. She could have caused accidents, destroyed appliances. People could have gotten hurt. I know. Jessica exhaled a shaky breath. This isn't about Christmas, she whispered. She's obsessed with control. Yeah, I said softly. And she's losing it. A gust of cold wind swept down the street. The lights flickered, and it hit me. This wasn't over. The retaliation had just begun. At exactly 9:17 p.m., the entire street went dark. All at once. Lights off, inflatables collapsing, music drowning into static. Gasps and shouts filled the street. Kids screamed. Parents cursed. Cold panic swept through the crowd. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear. Rage. Jessica grabbed my arm. Evan, it's not the utility box, I said instantly. This is too clean. Too controlled. Maplewood Lane wasn't the only one dark. I looked west, and my stomach dropped. Only our street was out. No other houses. No other yards. Only Maplewood. She did it. She actually did it. Somehow, someway, Marla cut the power. Neighbors lit phone flashlights. Someone fired up a generator. People murmured in the cold darkness. How? How'd she do it? It's targeted. She's crazy. She can't do this. I raised my voice. Everyone stay calm. We'll figure this out. But even as I said it, my heart raced, because there was only one way she could have pulled this off. She found a way to isolate Maplewood Lane's power feed from the neighborhood grid. And only one person had access to information like that. The former HOA treasurer. A man who used to be an electrician. A man who disappeared from Maplewood a year ago, after quietly selling his house to an LLC that Marla helped facilitate. She didn't get the idea herself. Someone helped, which meant this wasn't the work of a single angry HOA president. This was a conspiracy. And tonight, they tried to break Maplewood Lane. To break us. To break me. I stepped forward into the center of the street and shouted, Everyone, get your backup lights. Grab batteries, candles, anything. We're turning Maplewood back on. The anger in the air shifted. People stopped panicking. They started acting. Generators roared to life. Flashlights blinked on. Portable LED trees lit up the sidewalks. And through it all, something else shone brighter. Determination. The blackout wasn't the end. It was the catalyst. The spark. The match lighting the fuse. We weren't giving up. Not tonight. Not ever. By midnight, Maplewood Lane was glowing again. Maybe not with the same brilliance as before, but with something more important. Unity. Neighbors stood in clusters with hot cocoa and blankets, checking on each other, helping one another. Children laughed as they jumped around the glowing snow. And then, car approached. Slow, expensive, black, a Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows. It rolled to a stop at the end of the street. Doors opened. 2 community safety enforcers stepped out. Then, Marla, her silhouette framed by the SUV's headlights like she was starring in her own villain origin story. Neighbors murmured in anger. She strode down the street in a white coat that made her look like an angry snow leopard. She stopped 20 feet from me. You, she said, her voice dripping venom. You caused this. Really? I asked. Because last I checked, I wasn't the one cutting power to families on a winter night. She smiled. Cold, smug smile. You can't prove anything. Want to bet? I asked, taking a step forward. I'd love to, she said, closing the distance. You think these people are your friends? They only support you because they're scared of me. And they should be. They know what I can do. Not anymore, I replied. The county shut you down. For now, she said calmly. Investigations don't last forever. And when this one ends, I'll be reinstated. A ripple of fear moved through the crowd. She felt it. She smiled wider. I've run this neighborhood for 3 years, she said. You think a binder full of petty grievances is going to stop me? You think you can turn them against me? I laughed. Marla, they were never with you to begin with. Her eye twitched. You're finished, she hissed. You and your pathetic holiday circus. Funny, I said. Because the only thing that's finished is your reign of terror. She leaned closer. You have no idea who you're messing with. Neither did she. Because behind me, a familiar voice spoke. Actually, said the voice, he knows exactly who he's messing with. We all turned. It was the county inspector, Rick, flanked by 2 more officials, holding papers. Lots of papers. Marla Whitfield, he said. We have found probable cause of multiple violations of county code, state regulations, and HOA statutes. Her face crumbled. This is harassment, she whispered. This is justice, Rick corrected. He held up a document. Effective immediately, you are banned from all HOA activities until further notice. Gasps, cheers, applause. Marla tried to speak, but the inspector talked over her. And starting tomorrow, we're conducting a forensic audit of all HOA finances. No, she screamed. You can't. Oh, we can, he said. And we will. Tears filled her eyes. I'll fight this, she growled. With what? Rick asked. Your fake bylaws? Your fake fines? Your little private army? She trembled. But I'm the HOA president. Rick shook his head. No, you're not. He handed her the paper. I hereby remove you from the board. Effective immediately. Silence. Shock. A gasp that seemed to travel the entire street. Marla's world shattered. Her knees buckled. She looked at me, eyes wide, filled with hatred and disbelief. You did this, she whispered. No, I said gently. You did. She screamed, a sound of pure, primal rage, then spun on her heel and stormed back to her SUV. The safety enforcers scrambled after her. The Escalade tore away, fishtailing on the icy street. And as the taillights disappeared, Maplewood Lane erupted into cheers so loud the entire neighborhood heard. In the warmth of those cheers, something incredible happened. Lights flickered back on. Not metaphorically, literally. Street by street, house by house, the power returned. The whole block came alive in a cascade of color. Inflatables rose from their deflated slumber. Santas lit up. Reindeer glowed. Snowflakes sparkled. It was magical. The Christmas spirit restored by the very community she tried to crush. I stood there, soaking it in. The sound of laughter, the glow of lights, the relief of justice. Jessica nudged my arm. You did it, she whispered. I shook my head. No, I said. We did. Neighbors gathered around me again, thanking me, hugging me, offering food, cocoa, cider, cookies. And for the first time in years, Maplewood Lane felt whole. But as I stared down the now glowing street, I felt something else. Closure? Not quite, because Marla wasn't gone forever. Not yet. And the final fight was still to come. The night Marla was removed from the HOA board became something of a legend on Maplewood Lane. People didn't go inside after the confrontation. They stayed up past midnight, drinking hot chocolate, eating baked cookies neighbors brought out on trays, and watching the street glow like a tunnel of pure holiday magic. But even as laughter filled the air, and the newly restored lights shimmered off fresh snow, I didn't go home. Not right away. Instead, I walked to the far edge of the road and stood alone under the street lamp, my breath fogging in the cold. Maplewood Lane was safe for now. But Marla's last scream, that brittle shriek of a tyrant losing control, echoed in my head. This isn't over. Bullies don't stop when you shut them down. They plot, they scheme, they simmer. And Marla Whitfield was the kind of woman who would burn her own house down if she thought the ashes could hit you in the face. I wasn't celebrating yet. There was still one final fight ahead. I just didn't know how big it would be. Not yet. The next morning at 8:03 a.m., a fleet of county vehicles rolled into the neighborhood. 4 white SUVs, 2 official sedans, and a van marked County Financial Forensics Unit. Neighbors gathered on porches in robes and slippers, clutching cups of coffee like it was some early Christmas parade. Only this wasn't festive. This was the calm before the legal apocalypse. Inside the clubhouse, the inspection team set up tables, scanners, monitors, and document boxes. It looked less like an HOA office and more like a crime scene command post. I was summoned at 9:12. "Mr. Blake," the lead auditor said, "we need your help." I walked inside. The room smelled like anxiety and stale printer paper. "We've reviewed your complaint," the auditor continued, tapping a large binder, my binder. "Your documentation is extremely thorough." I nodded. I tried to keep everything clear. "You did more than that," he said. "You mapped the entire scheme." He slid several documents toward me. "Do these look familiar?" I skimmed them. Invoices, contracts, payment slips, electronic transfers. But the names on them: Whitfield Property Management LLC, Safe Haven Community Enforcement LLC, Oak Hollow Landscaping Solutions LLC. All owned by the same person. All owned by Marla. "Jesus," I whispered. She wasn't just enforcing fake rules. She was funneling money. The auditor nodded. All HOA fines, all late fees, all extra assessments from the past 18 months went directly into shell companies she controlled. "She stole from us," I said quietly. "She stole from everyone," the auditor corrected. He pointed at one file. "This one is the worst. She imposed a mandatory winter landscaping fee last December. 48 homes paid it. The total?" He flipped the page. $38,400. I felt sick. "She didn't spend a penny of it on landscaping," the auditor said. "She deposited it into her husband's law firm account." Classic laundering. Neighbors outside pressed their faces to the clubhouse windows, watching the scene unfold like spectators at a trial. "Mr. Blake," the auditor said softly, "this is criminal." I nodded. I knew. "And we'll need you to testify," he added. "I figured," I answered. The auditor leaned back, looking exhausted. "I've handled HOA fraud before," he said. "But this is the biggest case in county history. And she's not going quietly," I warned. "She tried to cut power to the street last night." He exhaled. "Then let's move quickly." The storm was coming, and this time the law was on my side. Around noon, everything went wrong. The first sign was the sound of engines. Loud, deep, and aggressive. 3 black SUVs pulled into the neighborhood. Not county vehicles. Not HOA vehicles. Private security. Painted midnight black, tinted windows, chrome grills. Neighbors backed away, nervous murmurs spreading. The SUVs stopped in front of the clubhouse, and the back doors opened. Out stepped a tall man in a charcoal suit, 2 bodyguards, and then Marla Whitfield herself. She didn't look defeated. She didn't look shaken. She looked furious, like a woman ready to take a chunk out of the world. She marched straight toward the clubhouse entrance, ignoring the whispers around her. The county inspector intercepted her halfway. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, "you're not allowed in here. You've been removed from the HOA board." She shoved a piece of paper at him. "I filed a temporary injunction," she snapped. "You cannot remove me from office without a formal court hearing." He scanned it, eyebrows raised. "This is handwritten," he said. "It's notarized," she snapped. He held it up again. "By your husband," she hissed. "It's still valid." "It's not," he said. "Notarization doesn't make a fake injunction real." "I am the HOA president," she screamed. "Not anymore," he repeated calmly. She pushed past him. The inspector stepped in front of her again, blocking her path. The confrontation grew louder, angrier, hotter. Neighbors watched from their porches and lawns, clutching coats tighter. I stepped forward. "Marla," I called out, "stop this before you make it worse." She turned slowly, her eyes locked onto mine. Pure hatred. "You?" she spat. "Everything was fine until you moved back here. You've been abusing this neighborhood," I said. "People are scared of you." "Good!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Fear keeps order." That quieted the whole block. Even the wind seemed to stop. A cold, unsettling silence spread through the air. She looked around, daring someone to challenge her. "Nobody cared about Christmas," she hissed. "Nobody cared about decorations. I was the only one trying to keep this community civilized." "No," I said. "You were trying to keep it under your thumb. You ruined everything," she shouted, pointing at me. "You poisoned them." People began muttering angrily. She ignored them. "I warned you," she hissed. "I told you not to push me." "You pushed yourself," I said calmly. Her face twisted. She turned back to the inspector. "I'm going inside," she declared. "No," the inspector said firmly. She lunged toward the door. Her bodyguards reached for him. Before I could say a word, 3 sheriff's deputies rushed from the street and grabbed them. "Hands behind your backs," one ordered. "Now!" The bodyguards resisted. Bad choice. They were slammed against the SUV hood. The deputies turned to Marla. "Ma'am, you need to step back." She trembled with fury. "You have no right." "Step back." For once, she did. But the fire in her eyes said everything. She wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Inside the clubhouse, the atmosphere shifted. Auditors whispered urgently. Inspectors exchanged tense glances. A printer hummed nonstop, spitting out pages of damning evidence. And then came the moment that took everything from bad to catastrophic. "Mr. Blake," an auditor called, waving me over. I hurried to the table. He pointed at a stack of documents. "What's this?" he asked. I skimmed the papers, and my heart stopped. They were property transfer forms. For homes. Multiple homes. Quietly transferred. Signed fraudulently. And recorded without homeowner consent. Dozens of them. But that wasn't the worst part. The auditor tapped one specific form. "Look at this signature." I froze, because it wasn't just forged. It was forged so convincingly that I knew exactly who did it. "That's my name," I whispered. The auditor nodded grimly. "She forged your signature." The room blurred for a second as adrenaline surged through me. "She tried to transfer your home," he said. "The transfer is dated 2 days from now. It was scheduled for processing this week." "What?" I breathed. Neighbors gathered behind me, gasping as they leaned in to look. Jessica put a hand over her mouth. "She tried to steal his house," someone said. "She tried to steal your home," another echoed. The auditor handed me the form. The forged signature looked eerily perfect. Almost like she photocopied my old signature from when I drafted the bylaws, I whispered. The auditor nodded. She knew exactly what she was doing. This isn't negligence. This is calculated fraud. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from fury. She tried to take everything. She tried to take the symbol of my family, my childhood, my life. She tried to erase me from my own neighborhood. The auditor opened a folder. She did it to 6 other residents too. Voices erupted in shock. She targeted the homes with the highest equity, he continued. She wanted profit, I said coldly. She wanted control, Jessica added. The auditor nodded. And she was almost successful. I clenched my jaw. Not anymore. And for the first time that day, the anger turned into something else. Resolve. The final showdown wasn't optional. It was necessary. The news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, neighbors surrounded the clubhouse. Voices rose. People demanded answers. The inspector stepped outside and addressed the growing crowd. We have discovered evidence of felony fraud, forgery, and attempted property theft. Gasps, shouts, cries of outrage. And the primary suspect is, everyone already knew, Marla Whitfield. Dozens of heads turned toward the woman still arguing with deputies near her SUV. Deputy Carter, the most stone-faced one, approached her. "Ma'am," he said, "turn around and place your hands behind your back." Her face went pale. What?" she stammered. "No. For what? For what?" "For fraud," he said. "For forgery. For attempted real estate theft. And for intentionally cutting power to a residential street." She stumbled backward. No, you can't. You can't do this. I am the HOA president." "The HOA doesn't exist right now," Carter said. "And you're under arrest. This is harassment," she shrieked. "This is illegal. This is—" Her scream choked as the handcuffs clicked shut. Neighbors recorded. Kids watched with wide eyes. Adults stared in stunned silence. Marla twisted, kicked, screamed. "You'll regret this," she wailed. All of you. But her voice was drowned out by a sound, a slow, rising applause, from the entire neighborhood. Her face twisted into something unrecognizable. And as deputies guided her into the back of the cruiser, her eyes locked onto mine. "I'll destroy you," she mouthed. I shook my head. "You already destroyed yourself." And the door slammed shut. Over the next week, the county audit continued. Investigators dug through every document, email, and financial statement the HOA had ever touched. The findings were worse than anyone expected. $310,000 in stolen or misallocated funds. 14 fraudulent property transfer attempts. 22 forged documents. 39 illegal fines. 13 unlawful safety enforcement actions. And a long list of residents who had been bullied, threatened, or extorted. It was corruption on a level none of us imagined possible within a suburban HOA. Local news vans arrived. Reporters swarmed the neighborhood. And Maplewood Lane became the center of a county-wide scandal. I was interviewed. Neighbors were interviewed. Auditors made statements. And every time Marla's name was mentioned, the reporters' faces tightened like they were reporting on a supervillain. The county dismantled the entire HOA board. Permanently. A judge ordered all stolen funds to be repaid through the liquidation of Marla's assets. Her home, her vehicles, her investments, her husband's law firm accounts. Everything. She didn't just lose her power. She lost her kingdom. By Christmas Eve, the audit was complete. The HOA was dissolved. The bylaws I wrote were transferred to a new community committee, one appointed by the residents, not elected by manipulation. They asked me to chair the committee. I declined. "I just want to enjoy the holidays," I said. So they created a new position instead. Holiday Lighting Advisor. We all laughed, but it stuck. And on Christmas Eve, Maplewood Lane shone brighter than it ever had. Every house twinkled. Every yard glowed. Every kid sprinted around in pajamas and boots, excited for Santa. Neighbors came together for a massive block celebration. Hot chocolate stands, cookie tables, a fire pit where people roasted marshmallows, carols drifting through the air. It felt like the world had righted itself, like the neighborhood finally exhaled after years of tension. As kids played around me, and warm lights danced in the winter air, Jessica approached with a smile. "You did it," she said softly. "You brought back Christmas." I shook my head. "No," I said. "We brought back Christmas. It wouldn't have happened without you," she insisted. I smiled. "I just reminded people what they were capable of." She looked down Maplewood Lane. Glowing. Peaceful. Perfect. "You think we'll ever have another HOA president as bad as her?" she asked. "No," I said with a grin. "Not unless someone recreates her in a lab." She laughed. Then softer. "And you're okay? After all that?" I exhaled. "Yeah, I'm okay." Because I was. For the first time in years, I felt at home. Truly home. The house my parents gave me was safe. The community I grew up in was restored. The fear that had hung over Maplewood was gone. And as I stood there, surrounded by glowing lights and joyful voices, I knew this neighborhood wasn't just saved. It was reborn. Around 11:45 p.m., the celebration wound down. Parents carried sleepy kids home. Neighbors hugged goodnight. Snow began to fall gently across Maplewood Lane. I walked toward my house, hands in my pockets, humming to myself. For the first time in years, everything felt right. Then I saw it. A shadow. Long. Thin. Standing near the corner of my property. My instincts sharpened instantly. I stepped closer. The figure turned. A man. Late 40s. Clean-shaven. Wearing a long coat. Not a neighbor. Not a county worker. He smiled. "Mr. Blake." "Who's asking?" I replied cautiously. He approached slowly. "I'm Agent Nolan," he said, handing me a card. "State Attorney's Office." I inspected the card. It was real. "What can I do for you?" I asked. "We'll be moving forward with charges against Ms. Whitfield," he said calmly. "Your testimony will be crucial." I figured. He nodded. "But I didn't come just for that," he added. "I came to give you a warning." My stomach tightened. "A warning about what?" "Ms. Whitfield is persistent," he said. "She has connections. And before her arrest, she made it clear that she blames you for everything." "I know," I said quietly. "You need to be careful," he continued. "She has court dates ahead. She could be released on bond. And people like her? They don't stop." I nodded. "I can handle her." He studied me for a moment. Then, "I don't doubt it," he said. "But don't underestimate desperation." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing," he said, glancing back at me. "Your neighborhood. It's lucky to have you." I nodded, and he disappeared into the snowy night. I stood there alone, under the glow of Christmas lights. Snow falling softly, a strange mix of peace and unease settling in my chest. The war was won, but the battle scars would linger. And somewhere in a jail cell or interrogation room, Marla Whitfield was plotting her revenge. But tonight was Christmas Eve. And for now, peace reigned on Maplewood Lane. The next Christmas approached quietly, gently, without drama, without tension, and without a single HOA threat. The new community committee ran things with fairness and transparency. Our Christmas display became bigger and brighter than ever. Families from other towns visited Maplewood Lane just to see the lights. Neighbors laughed again. Kids played freely. Old friendships rekindled. And me? I stood on my porch with a cup of hot cider, watching the street glow with joy. Jessica joined me, nudging my shoulder. "Think we'll ever have another Christmas like last year?" she teased. I chuckled. "God, I hope not." She smiled. "But it made this one sweeter." She was right, because after everything, the blackout, the fraud, the arrest, the war, Christmas meant more now. It meant community. It meant resilience. It meant peace. And as snow began to fall again, soft and quiet across Maplewood Lane, I whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas," because after everything, we'd earned it. As the lights of Maplewood Lane glowed brighter than ever, one truth became crystal clear. No HOA, no bully, and no corrupt leader can ever defeat a united community. Christmas isn't about rules. It isn't about power. It isn't about control. It's about people, their courage, their kindness, and their willingness to stand together when darkness tries to take over. So remember this: evil thrives when good people stay quiet, but it collapses the moment good people speak up. If you enjoyed this story, and you believe in standing your ground, fighting back, and protecting what matters most, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment "Justice served" if you made it to the end. Your support helps this channel grow, reach more people, and bring you even more wild HOA stories and real-life neighborhood showdowns. Stay strong, stay brave, and never let anyone steal your peace. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the next story.